All right, welcome to the Bible in 5. We are continuing on our journey through the book of Kings, now going into 2 Kings. You're kind of entering into the second week of reading through this book. I'm not sure if you're finding monotonous yet, being introduced to king after king after king. It does have a real repetitive type of rhythm to it, but each king is different, and in their own ways, some are faithful, some are unfaithful. And actually in the book of 2 Kings, you run into some pretty horrible kings and some pretty stellar kings who are real models of faithfulness to Yahweh. So the transition of the book between 1st and 2nd Kings happens during the latter end of the stories about Elijah. And remember, Elijah becomes sort of like the archetypal prophet. Remember, I called prophets the covenant watchdogs. I think this is a helpful term to summarize their role. They were working on behalf of Yahweh to call Israel back to the covenant made at Mount Sinai. And so Elijah calls the people back and the kings back to stop following other gods, and he passes on the mantle. Literally, that's where that phrase comes from, and mantle is just like his cloak. He symbolically passes on his prophetic leadership to a young follower of his named Elisha, or Elisha. And his story begins here in 2 Kings chapter 3. And the stories are actually very similar. Elisha asks for 2 times the power of Elijah. And if you count them up, Elijah performs about 7 miraculous signs and wonders. And Elisha, we're given exactly double that number of stories of miracles or wonders that Elisha produces. So he gets exactly 2 times the power of Elijah. And so he very much is in the same role. He confronts Israel's kings with their sin and their injustice, and he calls them back to follow Yahweh. But ultimately, unsuccessfully. So you remember that we have the civil war. There was a split between the northern Israel and southern Judah, and that continues. And chapters 9 through 17 give us the final kind of curtain drawing on the northern kingdom. All of the lines of the northern kings here in chapters 9 through 17 are bad. We read about a bloody revolution spearheaded by a guy named Jehu, very mixed character, murders and assassinates lots of people. And pretty much after this guy Jehu, there's just coup after coup after coup of people assassinating the kings and so on. And all of it leads to chapter 17, where the big bad Assyrian Empire sweeps down in the year 722 BC and just takes out the northern kingdom altogether, just wipes them out, conquers their capital cities, and literally deports the people of the northern kingdom all throughout the ancient Near East. And so chapter 17 is a real important moment in the story because the author steps in and he gives you it's like basically like a little sermon about why the exile of the northern kingdom happened, why Assyria was allowed to do this, and how God is working behind the scenes. And he basically says this is happening because the people abandoned Yahweh. They didn't follow the Torah. They were not faithful to the covenant, and so he lets them follow out the consequences of their decisions. And so the last chunk of the book here, chapters 18 through 25, are all stories about the lone surviving southern kingdom of Judah. And we're introduced to some pretty heroic figures in here. Assyria comes to destroy the north, and then they come knocking on the door of southern Judah too, during the reign of a king Hezekiah, and his story is told right here. And he is a model of faithfulness. He doesn't rely on chariots or horses or swords. He turns to Yahweh in prayer, and Yahweh delivers southern Judah from the oppression and the attack of Assyria. It's a very powerful story. But right on the heels of a good king Hezekiah, we're introduced to one of his southern Judah's worst kings, a guy named Manasseh. And he brings other gods and their statues and idols and puts them into the temple in Jerusalem that Solomon built. And he institutes child sacrifice among southern Judah. It's just this horrible reign. And so because of Manasseh, God sends prophets to say, all right, that's it. You've reached the point of no return. And the final chapters of the book of 2 Kings, chapters 24 to 25, tell the story not of Assyria coming to wipe out northern kingdom, but it's of Babylon coming to take out southern Judah. And so the book of Kings ends with the Davidic kings being carried off into exile, with the temple that Solomon built being burned to the ground and destroyed, with many and many of the people being exiled and carried off out of the land. It's a very dark picture as the story ends. And so it raises all of these questions. Remember the whole story of Israel. Remember, why do we care about these people? We care about them because of the promise to Abraham, that through these people somehow God is going to bring blessing and salvation to all nations. And so big questions as we finish the book of 2 Kings. Is God going to stay faithful to his promises? What about his promise to David in 2 Samuel 7 to send the Messiah, the king from the line of David? How is Yahweh going to rescue the world? How is he going to rescue these people? All of those questions are just left hanging at the end of 2 Kings. And so as you have those questions looming in your mind then, that's what you take in as you begin to read the rest of the storyline of the Old Testament. So this is a very powerful story. It's a tragic ending, but it's illustrating for us the brokenness of the human heart and how much sin has affected human thinking and behavior and culture, and it's a very realistic depiction of life in our world. So it's a very powerful read. I hope it does its work on you as you eat this book. So we'll see you next time.